Everyone knows the story. A man runs from God, gets thrown into the sea, and a giant fish swallows him whole. And almost everyone remembers it the same way, as a punishment. The monster of the deep, sent by an angry God to swallow a disobedient prophet. Case closed. Sunday school over. And it's wrong. Almost completely wrong. Because here is what your Bible actually says if you slow down and read the words. The fish was not sent to punish Jonah. The fish was sent to save his life. At the very moment he was drowning, sinking, out of breath, seaweed wrapping around his head in the black water, something rose up out of the deep and caught him. So what kind of creature was it really? Did any of this actually happen? And why on earth would God rescue a man who had just looked him in the eye and said he would rather die than obey? There are wild theories. A sailor supposedly swallowed by a whale in 1891 who lived to tell it. An ancient myth, borrowed and rebranded, a secret code for the exile of an entire nation. Some are stranger than you'd guess, but the truth, the mercy hidden inside that fish, is stranger and far kinder than any of them. Let me show you. First, understand that Jonah was not a fairy tale figure. He was a real, named man. Long before this story, a single line in the book of 2 Kings mentions a prophet named Jonah, the son of Amittai, from a little village called Gath-hepher in the northern kingdom of Israel in the days of King Jeroboam II, 8th century before Christ. A real prophet in a real place, in a real and dangerous time. And to feel this story, you have to feel the name that starts it. God tells Jonah, "Go to Nineveh." Now to you and me, Nineveh is just a word. But to an Israelite, Nineveh was the beating heart of Assyria, the most feared military empire on earth. The Assyrians were infamous for a cruelty that turned stomachs even in the ancient world. They flayed their captives alive. They built pyramids of human skulls outside conquered cities. They dragged prisoners away with hooks through their faces. Nineveh was the capital of the nation that would one day destroy Jonah's own people. So when God says, "Go and warn them so I can spare them," Jonah does the only thing his heart will let him do. He runs the opposite direction. He goes down to the port at Joppa, and he buys passage on a ship bound for Tarshish, the far western edge of the known world, the end of the map, as far from Nineveh as a human being could possibly sail. He is not just disobeying. He is trying to get to a place where he thinks God's mercy cannot reach. And out on that sea, a storm rises up that terrifies even the hardened sailors, and lots are cast, and they land on the sleeping prophet below deck. And Jonah says the words that start everything, "Throw me into the sea." And they do. And down he goes, into the dark. Now, what swallowed him? Let's walk through the theories, because most of them fall apart the moment you look closely. Start with the one everyone reaches for first. It was a whale, and a man really can survive inside one. And the proof, people say, is a true story. In 1891, a sailor named James Bartley, aboard a whaling ship, was supposedly knocked overboard and swallowed alive by a sperm whale. When the crew later killed and butchered that same whale, the story goes, they found Bartley inside its stomach, unconscious, his skin bleached white by the digestive acids, but alive. He recovered and lived for years afterward, a modern-day Jonah. It's a gripping tale, and I have to be honest with you, the way a teacher should be. It is almost certainly a hoax. When historians actually went digging, the cracks appeared everywhere. There are no records of any sailor named James Bartley on that ship. The captain's own wife reportedly said the story was pure invention, that there was never even a man by that name aboard. And the biology is brutal. A sperm whale's throat could perhaps pass a human, but the crushing pressure, the lack of oxygen, and the digestive environment would kill a person long before rescue. So the famous proof isn't proof at all. And here's the detail most people never notice. The Bible never even says it was a whale. The Hebrew simply says dag gadol, a great fish. Not a species, not a whale, just a great fish, prepared by God. Hold on to that word, prepared. We are coming back to it, and it changes everything. Now the second theory, and this one wears a scholar's coat. It says the whole thing is myth, a fish-swallowing legend the Hebrews borrowed from older cultures, and there's a surface case for it. Other ancient stories do feature a hero swallowed by a sea creature. In Greek legend, Heracles is said to leap into the jaws of a monster to save a princess. Similar motifs turn up here and there across the ancient world. So, the skeptics say, Jonah is just one more sea monster myth in a very old costume. But here's what most people overlook. Look at what those other stories are actually about. They are hero stories. A mighty man slays a beast, rescues the maiden, wins the glory. Now look at Jonah. Jonah is no hero. Jonah is a coward and a runaway. He doesn't slay the fish saves him. He doesn't win glory. He spends the whole book sulking. The book of Jonah takes the shape of a monster legend and turns it completely inside out. It is not a story about a brave man conquering a beast. It is a story about a bitter man being conquered by mercy. That's not borrowing a myth, that's demolishing one. So the myth theory doesn't just fail, it points us straight at the real subject of the story. Keep that in mind. There's a third theory, gentler and cleverer than the others. It says the fish never literally happened, that the whole book is an allegory. Jonah, they say, represents the nation of Israel. The great fish represents Babylon, the empire that would one day swallow Israel and carry her into exile. And just as the fish spat Jonah back onto dry land, Israel would one day be spat back out of exile and returned home. Read that way, the fish isn't a fish at all. It's a symbol. And I'll be straight with you, there is something real here. The book of Jonah is layered with meaning, and that exile echo is almost certainly intentional. The writer wants you to feel the swallowing and returning, the going down and being brought back up. But here's the problem with saying it's only allegory, that it never happened. Centuries later, Jesus himself spoke about Jonah, and he did not treat it as a fable. He pointed to it as a sign, a real one, tied to the most literal event in history, his own death and resurrection. So we can't just wave the story away as invented symbolism. It means something because it happened, and it happened in a way that means something. Which brings us, finally, to the answer hiding underneath all three theories. Go back to that word, prepared. The Bible says, "Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah." In Hebrew, that word is manah. It means to appoint, to assign, to send with a purpose. And here is the detail that will change how you read the entire book. That same word appears 3 more times before the story ends. God prepares a plant to shade Jonah. God prepares a worm to wither the plant. God prepares a scorching wind to teach him. The fish is the first of God's 4 appointments, and every single one of them is an act of teaching, not torture. The fish belongs on the list with the shade, not with the storm. It was not the jaws of judgment closing on a sinner. It was a hand reaching down into the deep to catch a drowning man. And you don't have to guess at this. Jonah tells you himself. From inside the fish, he prays, and listen to what he describes. He says the waters closed over him, even to his soul. He says the deep surrounded him. He says the weeds were wrapped about his head, that he went down to the very roots of the mountains, that the earth with her bars was closing behind him forever. That is not a man complaining about being in a fish. That is a man describing drowning. That is the last 30 seconds of a human life underwater. And then, right there in the middle of that prayer, the turn, "Yet hast thou brought up my life from corruption, O Lord my God." Brought up from the pit, from death. The fish is not what he's afraid of. The fish is the thing that pulled him back from the grave. The belly of that creature was the safest place Jonah had been since the moment he started running. So why does that matter so much? Why does God rescue a man who wanted to die rather than obey? Here is the mercy hidden inside the fish, and it is bigger than the fish. Jonah didn't run because he was scared of Nineveh. Read his own confession at the end. He ran because he was afraid God would forgive them. He says it plainly, "I knew that thou art a gracious God, and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness." That's why he fled. He could not bear the thought of his enemies being shown mercy. And so the God of that mercy does something breathtaking. Before Jonah will ever preach one word of grace to Nineveh, God gives him a private, personal demonstration of it. He lets Jonah run all the way to the bottom of the sea, to the absolute end of himself, and then he swallows him up, not in wrath, but in rescue. The fish is a small, dark, 3-day picture of the very mercy Jonah is trying to escape. God essentially says, "You don't want me to save your enemies? Then let me show you, from the inside, what it feels like to be saved when you deserve to sink." And this is exactly why Jesus reached for this story. When his critics demanded a sign, he said, "No sign would be given but the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so the Son of Man would be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Do you see it now? The going down into darkness, the 3 days, the being brought up alive from a place no one returns from. Jonah in the fish was a shadow, cast centuries early, of a tomb outside Jerusalem that would also be found empty on the 3rd day. The fish was never the monster of the story. The fish was the first gospel: swallow, darkness, and then resurrection. Let me make this land where you actually live, because you have a fish. Maybe you're in it right now. There is a place in almost every human life that felt, at the time, like being swallowed whole. A diagnosis, a collapse, a loss, a rock bottom so dark and so closed in that you were sure it was the end of you. A place where the weeds wrapped around your head and the bars of the earth seemed to close behind you. And you called it the worst thing that ever happened to you. You called it the punishment. But here is what Jonah learned in the dark, and what so many people only understand looking backward. Sometimes the thing that swallows you is the only thing that stops you from drowning. Sometimes the darkness you begged God to take away was the very place He came to find you. Sometimes what felt like the belly of a monster was actually the arms that caught you when you were sinking and held you in the dark for exactly as long as it took to turn you back toward home. That's the secret the story has been keeping for 3,000 years. The fish was never the wrath of God. The fish was the mercy of God, wearing the only disguise Jonah would climb inside. The fish was never the punishment. The fish was the rescue. If you want to see what happened when Jonah finally reached Nineveh, and the shocking way that story ends, with a mercy so wide it left the prophet furious, that video is waiting for you right on screen. And if you made it this far, consider subscribing. We're following the hidden thread of God's mercy through the oldest stories ever told, one at a time. Come further in.